I think going.
Yeah,
All
there
right.
you go.
Well, I wanted to kind of start. Some people I think probably know you well, and some people don't. But maybe just tell us a little bit about kind of your, I guess, history. I know, I kind of know you through various tournament happenings, and also through obviously the Best General, which is a podcast that you, I want to say, used to do, but we'll get into that a little bit more later. But maybe tell us a
Sure.
little bit about kind of what you do and kind of, what's your kind of background here?
My name is Adam Abramowitz. As of today, I'm the media director at the Army Painter. It's an amazing job, an amazing company to work for. I have to give a quick plug. Go find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter at the Army Painter. I've been working on some awesome tutorials. Here's a sneak preview.
Oh, another world exclusive.
That's coming out.
That's 2 world exclusives you had on the show in the last interview. So thank you.
This one's actually pretty cool. So I used to work, since you want to know all about me, I used to work in TV and film, and a lot of my friends that I graduated college with that we used to make movies with together have gone on to do some really incredible things, and they're all very talented and successful. My friend John, his big producing credit was Star Wars Rogue One. My buddy Jeff just had a movie released a couple weeks ago, and he worked on Veep, and then Jordan is now the executive producer director of a Hulu original called MODOK. So it's like his first Marvel credit, and he asked if I would paint up a MODOK miniature for the lead, the guy who plays MODOK, and it's Patton Oswalt, who's one of my favorite actors. So I said, I could certainly paint them for you, but I'm going to make a video about it. And he's like, yeah, absolutely. Let's do it. So I just finished those up yesterday. I'm editing everything now. So that's what I do at the Army Painter. It's our video tutorials, a little bit of product development, and community outreach, going to events and working with events on prize support and cool things that we can do to help, support the hobby and support the community, but also, grow our awareness in those events. I came to gaming kind of late in life. Like I toyed around and played and painted when I was, preteen, early teen, and got out of it and only rediscovered it when I was like 27. And I got pretty hardcore into painting. And then when I found out there was a competitive scene, I jumped in head first, but I was never a great competitive player. And I was involved with other podcasts at the time, and it was I was kind of the butt of the jokes for never understanding the rules and barely understanding or having a grasp on the game. I was just a guy who could paint halfway decently, and I got kind of fed up with that, and I decided to challenge myself to go out and win a grand tournament. I picked the one that I wanted to win, and I went about it by talking to I guess now we have professional 40K players. That's kind of where we're at today. When I started the podcast, it wasn't quite there yet, but I think Nanavati had just started his coaching service, so gave him kind of a platform to promote that a bit. And, he helped me out, and I talked with 40K champions of all shapes and sizes. I don't think I ever wrangled you and got you on the show, but I don't think
I was playing much back in that during that time. Like that was like your first season. I think a lot of actually my journey also followed. I feel like I followed your journey a lot because I was very much similar to you in a sense where I was primarily a hobbyist focused, and for me to, I always had a competitive edge, but I definitely feel like I took a lot of inspiration from that.
I appreciate that. I mean, you really, I remember. It's hard to tell time, because we've basically lost a 40K season, right? So I guess it was 2 or 3 years ago, and you had that early season into the summer where you were just like, you were top table at everything that you went to. And I had known who you were just kind of on the periphery. I knew that you were a really good painter. And I joked that you were my favorite baker because of Virtuous Pie. You're like, dude, I'm not a baker. But it was really cool to watch you kind of come through the ranks really quickly, and you really dominated. It was pretty amazing to see, and it's what I think has been really cool in the resurgence. I don't even know if it's the resurgence or the renaissance or it's just the growth that we've experienced in the past 3 years or so in competitive play is it's not just the same names and faces there all the time. You're starting to see new names, new faces, more people, and I think that's really cool. I don't know if that's a testament to just the growth of the game and the community, or if that's because the rule sets are more welcoming and inviting. I'm not sure, but I think it's really cool that at any given GT you could see a new name close to the top.
Yeah, and so you obviously had a podcast called The Best General, and I think that was kind of where a lot of people, it was from my perspective. I didn't used to listen to a lot of Warhammer podcasts, but I found it was very well produced. Like it was very narrative, I guess, like about your journey through that. So, and obviously it was kind of about, maybe tell us a little bit about what that was about and kind of give maybe people an update. I know you're probably very busy with your Army Painter and New Baby, but can you give us a little update on will we ever see any more of The Best General, or was that like a chapter that you kind of closed and or maybe we'll see something in the future that's small, but obviously not to the level that you did in the past. So what's the future of The Best General as far as a podcast, and kind of what was did you accomplish your goals?
Yeah, so I guess I'll go back to let's do it chronologically. Let's do it in a serial way, like my show was. I mean, the whole idea of the show was to tell a different perspective of the 40K story that wasn't just new releases, because up until that time, and I'm not trying to say that I broke any grounds or anything like that, but most of the 40K podcasts were people talking about rumors, talking about new releases, talking about things like that. And after my show came out, you started to see, Colin launches the Best in Faction podcast, which is a really unique take. And then you have, Val and Peter doing, Stat Center, which is another really unique way to talk about the hobby, talk about the community and the game. And, I didn't want to just be another 40K podcast. I really wanted to document the journey and really, at the time that I started the Best General podcast, I wasn't in a real good spot personally. I mean, I had a lot going on. I had you and I have talked about some of the things that I was going through in my professional life at the time, and trying to figure out and navigate being a new parent and just struggling. It was kind of like that weird, you're in your early 30s and you're going through that final growth spurt of your life, and getting over that hump was pretty tough for me. And competition is always something that has been an important part of my life, whether it was racing bikes or running track or playing golf. And I really needed to focus and dedicate myself to something. And 40K was that for that period of my life. And I used the Best General podcast and that journey as almost a way to keep myself accountable for my actions and decisions. And, I think that there was definitely some growth, and that was the goal going into it. So you asked me, did I attain my goal? I think I could answer that in multiple different ways. I think I attained that goal because I picked a tournament, and I eventually went to that tournament and I won, and it was absolutely magical the way that it happened. But broader than that, I grew as a person, and I kind of helped myself over that hump by starting the journey. So yeah, I think I definitely accomplished the goal. People ask me quite often, and I get a lot of flack for it, when's the next podcast coming? And the thing about the Best General podcast is that it was a hero's journey. It was that there was a plot structure to it, and that's just kind of how it worked out. So doing it now, I don't know what I would talk about. I need to set a goal for myself. I've toyed around with, do I want to play Age of Sigmar? Do I want to do something like that? And the reality is I don't have time to dedicate to that. And the way that the Best General podcast chapter for me ended would be very difficult to top.
Right.
From a storytelling point of view, from investing yourself emotionally and mentally and physically to something like that, it would be very difficult to surpass that. So I don't want to lose that. Now, I have been approached about potentially handing over the reins of the Best General to a new general, which I'm not against.
Interesting.
Yeah. and and this all kind of comes full circle to a certain extent back to the Army painter. The owner Bo, who I have so much to thank him for. Not to be a brown nose or anything like that. I'll we give each other flack all the time, but he's been really good for me. He's been great for my family. He's been great for my career, obviously, and I'm so thankful. But he's also just like a regular 40K nerd like we are, and he took some time away and for about 2 years, and now he's back and he's all in with 9th edition, and he's a former Danish team WTC ETC member. He knows the circuit and he wants to get back to it. And he also, we want to get back to the roots of painting armies at the Army Painter, because we've been real busy with other licenses and IPs. We've huge in D&D now and Star Wars Legion and a lot of different other things like Zombicide. And we want to get back to our roots in painting armies. And, there's nothing quite set in stone as to where we're going to go, but there's 3 really avid 40K painters and players that kind of fulfill 3 different. At the Army Painter, you have Bo, who's just the diehard. I'm going to build the most meta list. I want to crush my foes, but still have a good time. But he's constantly chasing the meta, which is why he developed a quick shade, product to begin with, like 13 years ago, because he's constantly painting armies. Then you have Thomas, who he's the other studio painter, and he's more of a hobbyist, very much so. He builds fluffy things. He doesn't necessarily field, optimal units, but he wants to get better tactically. And then you have me, and I'm kind of in between. Like I've played to both areas. I've been the War Master, I've been the fabricator artisan, and now I really want to focus on that overall being the total package. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think that we have 3 really unique stories that we could tell. And I'm eager to try and get them to the States to start going to some tournaments. And, maybe there's a different way that I could tell the best general's story or continue the best general's journey. It's not going to be picking a GT. And I talked about this, I'm sorry I'm rambling, but I talked about this with Nanavati, and I've talked about this with Chester.
It's Nick Nanavati and Brad Chester, for those that don't know.
Yes, sorry. Brad Chester and Nick Nanavati.
Just making sure I'm clear who you're talking about, because not everyone knows their last names.
Yeah, I forget that not everybody's on a first name basis with those knuckleheads. But to me, winning LVO and winning the ITC be amazing, right? But I don't have the time and effort to really dedicate to that. I can't travel to 36 tournaments a year or whatever that is. And B, even if I did that, I'm not sure that I would get the satisfaction from it that I did from winning Warzone Atlanta 2 years ago, because it really was like a storybook way to end everything, the way it all kind of culminated. So, I don't know what a Best General podcast would look like if I did it today. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. I'm not 100%. I think ultimately, for me, the cool part about the Best General was always that it was a story, and it was a pursuit of something, and it was never about the goal. I guess it was mostly about the journey. So I guess for you, you'd have to really think about what you want to accomplish. But I do want to ask you a little bit about your role at the Army Painter. So you mentioned it quite a few times, obviously, already. So a lot of people, I think, in their heads would love the idea of like turning their hobby into a career. Sounds great on paper. A lot of people dabble into commission painting. A lot of people, look at maybe people that might work for Games Workshop or other big miniature companies. What are some of the things that you don't like here? Because I feel like there's some really good parts that I'm sure I'd love to hear about. Like, what are some of the favorite parts of the job? But what are some of the things that are not as like rosy and beautiful and like wondrous as you'd think? Because you're doing this now full time. It's not a hobby anymore for you, so that means it's not a thing that you can do just sometimes when you want as an enjoyment. Right. You're doing it to pay your bills. So tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the Army Painter, and maybe we can talk about that later. But yeah, what would you say some of the kind of misconceptions are about someone that basically, essentially, you paint and make videos for the Omni Painter for a living, essentially, and then some other things on top of that. But tell me a little bit about that, and I'm always interested to kind of hear what those are.
So and I think this is something that you and I have actually talked about in the past. I am still an owner of a bike company, right? Very small owner, but it's a company that I founded and started many years ago. And cycling was a huge passion of mine. And I think I learned the hard way about how working in your passion, turning your passion into a profession could actually really tarnish that passion. Because cycling's really lost its luster for me a little bit. And then I was commission painting, and not because I wanted to just make a few extra bucks, because it was really the only option for me at the time. I had to stop taking a paycheck from my company. My first daughter was born 2 weeks prior. And I got really burned out doing that, because you're literally trying to pay rent. Fortunately, I'm in a much better situation now. And I think I've learned from both of those experiences, how to not, turn something that I love, which is painting models and playing games, into something that I dislike. And I've been very careful to not get burnt out. So especially like right now, people ask me all the time, when are you coming to a GT? When are you going to go to an event? Like, I am so far out of the loop in the current meta, and I'm not going to force myself to keep up, because I enjoy where I'm at with the hobby. I'm thinking about starting a new fluffy army in the future, and just going that route for a little while, and not having to worry about chasing the meta. But I mean, it's a job. I mean, there's still hard things. The fortunate thing for me is that Bo and the company really recognize what I'm good at and what I'm not so good at. And they kind of let me revel and kind of exist in the space that I am good at. And, maybe it's because it's a Danish company. I'm so used to working for American companies. There's a huge focus on preserving yourself and your mental health and your physical well-being. If I had a deadline coming up tomorrow and I just told them, look, guys, I'm really struggling right now, I need some time, they would say, absolutely. There's very much, and it's really cliche to say, like, work hard, play hard. That's really true at the Army Painter, but they also want you to rest hard. My last evaluation, I sat down with Bo, and Bo says, I want you to take 5 weeks vacation this year. And I just kind of laugh, because I take vacation very rarely. Like, there's 1 week a year and then a couple of holidays. He's like, no, I'm really serious. It's important to me because you're doing a lot of work, and I need you to be fresh. I need your brain to be fresh. So when we do have these, 6-hour sessions where we're brainstorming about crazy concepts and possibilities for the future, I need your brain. I can't have you, totally wasted. I got to play. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. We're back with Adam Abramowitz from the Army Painter, talking about avoiding burnout.
Yeah. I mean, if anything, I could tell anybody that wants to turn their hobby into, their profession. I don't want to say it's the grass is always greener on the other side, but you just have to be very careful, because you can very easily burn out because it's something that you love to do. So you want to work harder at it, but you really need to preserve your space. And I think hobbies are good to be, you need to have an escape from work in your profession recently, just so like once every couple of weeks I can go spend 4 hours away from my hobby, my other hobby and my profession. So it's important to have those places to escape to, and do want to preserve that as much as you can.
Right. And so what is like an average day for you like? Because I think a lot of people, maybe if they're interested in potentially getting, I have a very, well, okay, let me back that up. I have a very unique role in what I do in culinary development in my job. And the kind of job I have, it's like, as a chef, it's like 1 in 1,000. Like there's not that many of these jobs, right? The kind of stuff that I do. And I know your job is very similar. Like there are not a lot of people who get paid outside of maybe as a professional miniature painter, essentially, or content producer by a corporate company. There's obviously, we have things like the Heavy Metal team and the Army Painting team from Games Workshop has, obviously. And then I know there's lots of other miniature companies out there. Not a lot of them have dedicated full-time miniature painters that And obviously, you guys aren't actually a miniature company. You guys are a paint company, so that's even more like different. So tell me a little bit about kind of what the day like, how lucky you must feel to have a job like that, because it is so rare. And how would someone go about if they are interested in potentially pursuing a career similar to what you're doing? How what advice would you give them?
Well, I was interviewed by was it Goonhammer recently, or I can't remember who it was that interviewed me. I'll have to think about it, and I'll get you the link for the show notes or something like that. But that was kind of one of the questions that came up. How would you recommend somebody that wanted to work in your industry to do that? And you just got to be able to put yourself out there, and that's something that I've never had a problem doing. The way I came about to the Army Painter is very serendipitously. I was doing work for another paint brand, and I was kind of being strung along. I mean, the whole plan was for me to have a full-time position there, and I was working on some marketing projects for them. And a few months went by. I mean, it was after a couple of years, but a few months went by, and I hadn't heard from them. They were paying me to go to events, things like that. And at one of these events, I had run into Bo and introduced myself and had a pleasant conversation about politics and guns and paint. And we exchanged business cards. And so I sent a message to this other company. I said, what's like, it's time to shit or get off the pot. Like, what's really happening here? Because I feel like I'm delaying potential progress in my career for you guys, but you're not coming back to me with what we've discussed. And they basically said, well, we really appreciate all the work. We've decided to go a different route and hire somebody locally. But we really love the marketing plan that you put together for us. Thank you. And there was like no compensation for that. Yeah. And it was not even 48 hours later, I get an email from Bo saying, hey, are you still working with so-and-so? And I said, no, as a matter of fact, I don't think so. And he says, well, let's talk. And 2 weeks later, I was on a flight to Reno to meet him and Jonas at Gamma. And we had a really good conversation. They do say networking is everything. And to some extent it is. I was fortunate to be in a place and a time where I could meet and have a conversation with Bo. And obviously there was something about our conversation that made, him remember me from many months later to send me an email. So that said, I mean, you have to be able to put yourself out there and you have to be confident. And I think, you going back to your question about like what it's like in a day of Adam Abramowitz, the media director at the Army Painter. The majority of the people that know me as the media director and the guy that does the painting tutorials at the Army Painter, they think that that's probably my whole job. When the reality is it's probably about 15 to 25% of my job. And I think that the reason why Bo and Jonas, they took a huge risk hiring me because they knew that they needed somebody to do that, but they also needed somebody to help with product development. They needed somebody that could help with the community outreach. And and I think where I've progressed is that Bo and I think very similarly, but also we balance each other very well to when we get into these idea sessions. We come up with some really good stuff, and I think that we have a very mutual respect for each other to where we could hear each other out. And if there's something that, I'm really excited about, and he's not so much, he'll let me finish and then he'll break it to me. And there's nothing personal. It's all business. But it's, where am I going with this? I think that the reason that I stuck out to Bo and Jonas was because of my experience before being a business owner, working in distribution at a certain point in time, working in product development in other industries, but still having the ability to talk in front of a camera and a little bit of know-how on how to make these videos. And my network was valuable to them. To be honest, I don't think that they had any idea what the Best General podcast was. And I think that was actually kind of a blessing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely interesting. I think I think probably a lot of people think that you just sit there and paint models all day and then make videos. So do you do a lot of the editing yourself, or do you guys have an editor, or how does that work?
Yeah. Backtrack a little bit. I was 3-4 years ago, I was only the 17th hire at the company. Just in this past year and a couple months, we've gone from basically about 20 employees to like 70. we've grown quite a great deal. We've quadrupled our output. Things have really grown. And, so some days it is just painting miniatures all day. Then the next day it's me editing. For the most part, I'm the only editor. Recently hired Thomas, but Thomas is like our true studio painter. He's the guy that's painting models for box art and for marketing and things like that. And he's doing a little bit of video, but they're just getting set up. We just built a new marketing studio, and he's getting all of his equipment set up, so he's not quite there yet. So there is no editor. When it comes to video work, for the most part, it's I'm scripting, shooting, talking, painting, editing, posting, all that fun jazz. But we've got this what's been really fun is that we've gone from 3 people in the marketing department to about 7. And now we have we all had to wear a lot of hats, and while we still do, we've been able to bring in some really talented people that are specialists in their field. We've got this guy, Jonas, we call him Little Jonas. He is an expert at print and print design. And then we've got Amy, who is an expert at digital design, and she's very smart and talented. And Mads has been there for frickin' ever. So he does all the old school stuff. And Tina is our marketing manager. She is just total badass. It's really cool. It's almost like Bo is assembling the dream team for marketing, design, and product development. It's really fun to be a part of.
And what's your role? You'd mentioned helping Army Painter with ideas and kind of and development. So what kind of input and role do you have in development as far as new paint products, new lines? Because for those of you that don't know, the Army Painter, they don't just produce paints, they do also produce a large line of hobby accessories. I love your guys' tufts for static grass. Those are one of my favorite products. Obviously I have some Army Painter tools mixed throughout my stuff. They're really good price, really good, they're not the high end crazy Japanese model making stuff, but everything is fairly good quality, affordable. It's very approachable especially for someone that wants to get into the hobby. But what kind of input do you have as far as not just maybe when it comes to paints and paint colors, but also when it comes to tools and things that you guys should be getting into? How does that pipeline work?
It really depends. So it comes from a position of what are we capable of doing, right? You have to examine everything, because anything that we add to the production cycle could potentially take away from what we're doing really well. We take a lot of pride in always having stock of our products. And if for some reason a distributor is out of stock, it's not because we don't ship it. I mean, it's we're doing sometimes twice a month, we're shipping to distributors in containers across the world. And we take, like I said, a great deal of pride in making sure that the paints on this rack behind you at your retail store, it's easy for them to restock. So we put a strong effort in supporting brick and mortar. So when we do bring something new to market, we have to first think, is this something that our customers want and need? Is it something that we would use? And then we need to think, how is our retailer going to sell it? So if you look at our tool rack that came out a little over 2 years ago, everything that's on that tool rack, the tufts that you like to use and all of the tools that went into it, we had to really carefully think, is this the right fit? And are we going to sell it? And can we keep up with the demand? And that's a huge task. And then we have other products, I was just holding up airbrush medium. That was one of the first projects I got to work on. The Masterclass dry brushes and the wet palette. That's where I got a lot more hands-on, where I'm actually testing it. I'm sending drawings. I'm working with our product team to really nail down the perfect product. And this year I was tasked, and this has taken up a great deal of my time, a giant new product range that I can't really divulge too much about. Right. You'll see more about it in August.
Where Adam's going to give me the exclusive one-on-one interview. I'm kidding.
Yeah, I've always said that my dream job for a long time would be to work at Crayola and be the person who gets to name paint colors or crayon colors. And I kind of, at this point, I kind of have a bit of an opportunity to do that. So it's been it's been a real fun. It's a lot of hard work. Thomas is doing a lot of the legwork of this project. He and I are really tackling this, but it's really exciting. It's really exciting.
Now, I have a question, and like, I've always, as a consumer, I'm someone that I don't have loyalty to brands, I guess. I'm loyal to products. So like, if there's a product that I like, I generally don't care who makes it. And I'm very like, I guess, agnostic when it comes to like specific brands. Obviously, there's brands that I like more than others because their products are good. But like, obviously, when you work for a company, sometimes the like people just assume that like you like everything that they make, right? Like, oh, like you work for Army Painter, so you must love all their paints. But like, is there anything that like, is there opportunities for you where you don't like something? Like, there's a certain paint that you don't like the way that it's working, where the coverage isn't great, or it's chalky. Like, do you ever get a chance to kind of give that feedback on like existing things where you can say, you know what, this is something that I as a hobbyist, not as the guy that paints for the Army Painter, as a hobbyist, this is actually not great. Like, I don't like this, and we need to fix it, because maybe like there's lots of hobbyists that feel the same. Do you ever get a chance to give that kind of feedback on existing things?
All the time. I will say that we are our own harshest critics, and just because we are the Army Painter, and yes, we use our products a lot. I would say that we test and use other people's products probably more than they use ours. It's really good for us to know what else is on the market and what other things are doing, and it helps to make sure that our products are kept to a certain standard. I've run into few scenarios where I think that this could be improved. I mean, our magic activator or super glue activator, I never had a bottle arrive to me that wasn't half empty. And that's something that we've dug into to find out why. And it was actually the plastic that was holding the lid on, so there's all kinds of feedback. And there's definitely been paint colors that, we notice something. You have to think, when we're making a batch of paints, there's a lot of moving pieces that go into filling up that 18 milliliter bottle to make it perfect, right? And a lot of things can influence that. So sometimes something goes wrong and we need to fix it. That's how we improve. And I think the fact that we do use our paints constantly and all the time is how we know about it.
Right.
So like I said, I think that we are our own harshest critics. We understand when something is really good. We also understand that, and Jonas has this great quote, and it was when my first official day on the job, my first day in Denmark, they basically brought me right to the painting room, and he says, "Okay, I'm going to teach you how to spray paint dip done." I'm like, "All right, cool." And he was telling us a little bit about the paint. And Jonas, he's a former heavy metal studio painter back in the day, and he's basically the guy that designed the current war paints range. And yellow paint is a yellow paint's a yellow paint, right? That is something along those lines. He says all yellow paint is shit. There's a few out there that are really good, but it's really hard to make really good yellow paint. Now, is it worth losing money over creating something that's better? Because that's the thing. Like, you might look at this wall of paint and you think that every one of these costs exactly the same to fill up that bottle. That's not true at all.
Right.
Purple paints are world famous for being more expensive, and companies lose money on purple paints because purple pigment is heavier and you buy pigment by volume. That's just not how it works. So you have to weigh all of those things when making your decisions. You have to be informed when deciding what goes on the rack, what doesn't, what you're going to push. But I think that what a lot of people are surprised. I used the Army Painter paints before I started working there. There's very few brands of paints on the market that I haven't used. Today, this is all I use unless we're testing. And I think, the testament to that, because I think that there's a lot of people out there, especially there's hobby snobs, and they're one brand and they're brand loyal, like you said, and it's all that they use, and that's fine. We're never going to convince them as a customer anyways, but that's not what we aim to do. We aim to make good quality products at quality prices that are approachable and make sense to people that aren't necessarily 25 years in the hobby. I think that's something we do really well.
Right. Yeah. Like, I have like a full set of Army Painter paints, and like when it comes to like my rotation of paints, it just really depends on what I'm doing. And for some paints, I'll use various brands, right? Like I'll use sometimes like I just painted a Sisters of Battle model for a paint video, and I used 5 different brands of paints, right?
Yeah.
Everything from Army Painter Scale 75 to Monument Hobbies to Chimera Colors, et cetera, et cetera. So like I don't care who makes it. I care, is it good, and is a tool, right? Like is it doing the thing that I want it to do? And sometimes there's certain brands that have really good of certain colors, and there's certain brands that have certain really good, like the Army Painter washes, especially like the dark tone and the strong tone, are like amazing. They're the 2 colors I use the most, and I think probably the 2 colors you guys are most famous for, as far as like probably the most popular to this day still.
I think so.
But there's lots of and I think there's lots of great products out there. So how do you think Army Painter and this is a big question, but like for that painter that maybe is already using, and a lot of people get introduced, maybe they start, say they're playing Warhammer, they're going to probably start being introduced to Citadel, which is like the kind of, and they got a great range of colors. I think probably the biggest range of colors in a lot of paints, like for sure. So how do you get that painter who's sorry?
I think Vallejo has like 2,000 more.
Yeah, sorry, I guess Vallejo, but like Vallejo, I don't really count some of their like I guess I count their game color, but like their model color range, it's like here's 36,000 shades of camo green for your like various army men. How do you for that painter that's maybe been kind of started painting in the ecosystem, maybe they're only using that one brand that is available locally, what is the kind of secret to getting them to try new things? Because I often find that I'm usually I'll buy one paint of a new brand and I'll like try it out, see if I like it, and if I don't get a good paint, and there's definitely ones that I have on my shelf that I don't use, I just won't go back because I'm like, this was not good, the coverage wasn't good. So what is the kind of secret to getting people that maybe aren't in that Army Painter, aren't using those paints, to try the paints? Like how do you approach that hobbyist who is kind of paint curious, I guess, to get them to kind of try more things? Because I've been painting for almost like 20 years, but for the first 10 of it, I only used one brand. So only in the last like 5 to 8 years have I been like, oh, there's other paints out there, there's other brands. So a lot of people are in that similar boat where they're kind of one-minded, one paint brand, and they do that for a lot of their career, painting careers.
That comes down to comfort, though. I mean, that's part of it. Is people, we're creatures of habit. So if we bought Corax white, we're going to buy Corax white again.
It's like the worst white in the entire galaxy ever made.
So
awful.
Speaking of white, one of the ways that we get people to, and I think it's been very helpful, there's a lot of people out there that are Army Painter brigadiers. Like they've joined the Army. They are all about the Army Painter, and I love them. It's great. And we're not delusional to think that we're going to be everyone's only paint brand, and we don't necessarily want them to be. When I go to, that's another part of my job, is I go to trade shows, and it's my job to talk to retailers. And I've met with a lot of them that are torn. They want to get into tabletop. Maybe they were doing cards and comics, and this is new, and they don't know what paints to get, and they're conflicted. And it's a large investment. I mean, it's a lot of money for a retailer to bring in paints, a couple $1,000s, and if they're going with other brands, it's probably a lot more. And I always tell them, why should you? They ask me, why should I buy Army Painter over Vallejo or Citadel? And my stock answer all the time, and it's because it's the right answer in my opinion, is if you can afford to, you get Citadel and the Army Painter at the same time, and you put them next to each other. And I think it's because the two lines complement each other really well. Number one, if you're selling Warhammer, people aren't going to go to the rack and buy Army Painter paints first if they're buying their first box of intercessors or demons. They're going to go to that Citadel rack and they're going to buy Citadel paints. But if you're also doing D&D, people don't know. They don't know what Nagaroth Nightshade means.
Right.
They don't understand the naming and nomenclature. So Army Painter is a little bit more conventional, and you always. I think that there's a good argument to having options. I mean, options is what breeds success, in my opinion. It's what it breeds success for retailers. It breeds sales, because if you can look at a 12 milliliter pot of paint that costs $5.45, then you can look at an 18 milliliter bottle of paint that costs around $3. At least now you have the option. So how are you going to spend your money? You might get 2 more of these paints and one of the Citadel paints than you would buying just 2 Citadel paints, vice versa, whatever. You can mix it up however you want to, depending on, what kind of pocket money that teenage kid has when they go into the game store that week. So I tell retailers all the time, you're going to sell more Citadel paints because of the Army Painter being in your store. And then you're going to sell more Army Painter paints because of Citadel being in your store. Because now customers don't have to go to store X, Y, and Z to find the right paints that they want. They can just come to your store and they've got the diversity there.
Right.
So that's the real salesy point of view and way that you convince people to use our paints. I think that when I first came on board, there was like this strong misunderstanding that the Army Painter paints were soupy.
Soupy?
But yeah, because let me grab a paint here. Of course, I've got them all fresh and ready. One of the craziest things, and people don't realize this about a lot of paints, is that the pigment, you don't have thixotropic materials in hobby paints that like you would in like building paint. And thixotropic materials help keep pigment suspended in the medium, right? Your medium being resin. So there's actual resin in here, and that's what binds your pigment. So what happens over time is that the pigment.
Oh, I just lost you, Adam. Lost Adam? Well, hopefully. Okay. You're back.
Okay.
I lost you as you're holding up the paint. So to start with the paint.
Yeah. So the paint here, as paints sit, gravity does its work. Pigments, because they're heavy, will settle at the bottom. We have a lot of pigment in our paints. So what we actually do to preserve those pigments too is at the end of the production cycle, they top it off with just a little bit of extra medium. I call that the ketchup water. So when you get a new bottle of paint, and I've been trying really hard in our marketing and messaging and in the videos, is when you get a new bottle of paint, you just squeeze out that ketchup water that sits up on top and then give it a good shake. And you've got, like, in my opinion, some of the best covering paints in the market. Of course, you're going to have some colors that you struggle with. Like, jungle green is an obvious tough one. Anything that's yellow or red can be a little tough. But we also have some very strong reds that I think compete with any paints on the market. That's one of the big misconceptions. And I think that's one that we have to battle to win people over, because there's been this myth kind of, existing on the internet for a while.
Right.
The other thing that helps is getting painters, and players like yourself. Duncan, when I found out that he was leaving GW, I think it was Christmas Eve or Thanksgiving night or something like that. And I sent him a Twitter message right off the bat. And I was like, you probably don't remember me. We met at Nova many years ago. If I can help you out at all, just let me know. And I ended up building a really great relationship with the guy. He's an awesome person. And, he's very much like you. He uses Citadel paints still. And, when he paints Citadel models, he tends to use more of them. When he's painting World War II models, he tends to use a lot of Vallejo. When he's painting anything else, he uses the Army Painter.
Right.
But he still mixes everything together. And I think if one of the best painters and paint celebrities in the world can use a bunch of different paints, then we should too. Obviously, I hope that people try more Army Painter because Duncan uses them. But, time will tell. But I think that's been huge for us too. Our washes have strong recognition because people love to use our washes in their tutorials. So do our metallics. And now it's kind of bridging that gap to let people know that our war paints are just as good, if not better, in a lot of cases than other brands.
Yeah. So one of the things you mentioned D&D earlier, and I know that's actually like the miniature portion of D&D. D&D obviously is what actually started Games Workshop back in the 70s.
Yeah, they were.
And obviously, I used to play D&D as a kid. I haven't in the last 15 years. I think last I played was like second or third edition D&D, like maybe in my early teens. But D&D, and there's Crisis Protocol. We got Star Wars Legion. There's lots of miniature game kind of market has really exploded over the last I'd say like 5 years, especially with lots of new games. Even some people painting things like their X-Wing models. So how has the two questions. So first, how has the introduction of all these new miniature games helped Army Painter? Because I feel like when it comes to those games, people like Citadel is its own bubble. And so like if you're not playing Games Workshop games, you're probably not painting with Citadel paints because Games Workshop is very insular.
Yeah.
So that's my first question. So how has the explosion of those games helped? And then second, for you as a painter, what is it like? And what is it like getting to paint? Because for me, I have no reason to paint a Star Wars Legion model or I actually painted a Marvel Crisis Protocol model for a commission, and it was actually really fun. So I have very little reason to paint those kinds of models. So what's that been like painting those models, especially sometimes when like maybe the models aren't, at the level that you're used to. They don't have that crisp, super nice detail. Maybe the materials are a little bit weird. So what's that been like?
So, I mean, you have to give, Games Workshop credit where credit's due. They are, especially recently, some of the, if not the finest models in the world. The new game, like the new, I'm pointing to my Space Marines that you cannot see in the back, my Inti Marines back there. They are, the sculpts are just fantastic. And it was getting a little bit out of my comfort zone for a while there because, I don't paint a lot of resin. And, D&D miniatures can be quite small. Zombicide miniatures are totally different in the style. And it's not the hard edges necessarily. And what I've really enjoyed is it's almost taught me to paint. I had to train myself how to paint the GW way, back before I was an army painter. And that was, you base coat your wash, your first highlight, your edge highlight, and go, right? And that's not at all the way that you have to paint models, and there's a lot of things that make more sense to me and doing it a certain way or a different way than doing it the way that necessarily I was raised to do it since I was 12 years old. And I really enjoy that. I've learned that I really enjoy wet blending and stippling and getting to play with different techniques that, while at one end of the spectrum, my goal at, the Army Painter and the videos that we produce is to teach D&D players and new people to board games and tabletop miniature games that painting is a fun part of the experience that you can also enjoy and should at least give a try, right? So that's mission number one. And number two is to show them how simple it can be to get really effective results. But then I have to splurge a little bit every now and then. So like, I got to paint the Transcendent Satan, that new model. It's my daughter's. And I got to just push my limits and try all different kinds of techniques when I was painting these MODOK miniatures from Crisis Protocol. Like, it just screamed to try different techniques. It's not your standard edge highlight kind of model. And for me, that's been really fun. And, I hope to, expand on that when I start painting my own 40K Marines or Sigmar Marine or Sigmar armies and projects to come.
Yeah, one of my I painted a bust of Ciri from The Witcher 3 from CD Projekt Red. They actually make they make us very, like, I think they make two of them, resin busts, and that was actually one of the most fun projects. That it was a 75mm bust, and I'd never really done. I think I'd done maybe one bust way back in the day, but not only painting something that is completely, like, obviously I love The Witcher, I love that series of games, so it was something that, and the TV series has been amazing, so I loved painting something that it was something else that I loved that was like outside of the Games Workshop sphere. Yeah. I recently painted, as I mentioned, some Marvel models, which were really fun. And I have just some 3D printing has become such a big thing these days that there's a few 3D printed models that I've ordered that are not kind of off. They're just like basically like cool Space Marine like or Demon like models that I'm excited to paint that are not. So for me, it's been really cool to and then on those models, the nice thing is I can kind of do whatever I want, and that's where I can really experiment and push myself into weird places with miniature painting. What's it like working remotely, especially like you've taken working remotely to a whole new level, because not only are you working from home, most of your company is based in Denmark. Which is like not exactly, downtown or, down the street. So what's that like working remotely, and what are some of the big challenges that you've had to face to kind of stay motivated, especially because like I've struggled a lot working from home the last year and a half. Like there's days where I'm just like, it's hard to get out of bed. It's hard to like work. I have an office even I can go to, but I always struggle with it. So what's that been like working so far from the main team from Army Painter?
Like when the pandemic hit, it was real funny because everybody was struggling a whole lot. And I remember publishing some like tips, like just because you're working from home doesn't mean that you can sit in your pajamas all day. Like wake up, take a shower, do your routine. That's been key for me. But like, it was kind of like that scene in was it Batman? Was it the one with Bane? Like you were, like I was born in the darkness. You merely adopted it or whatever, embraced it or whatever. Like I had been doing this work from home thing for, quite a few years before I started working for the Army Painter. And, my job pre-pandemic did require quite a bit of travel. At least once a month I was at a trade show or an event like LVO or, Warzone, Nova. And I'm in Denmark 3 to 4 times a year. And I love that. It's good for me. I think I work really well from being home. It does have its struggles. I'm a social butterfly, but I get to let my freak flag fly when I go to these events, and I get to just kind of expend all of that energy and then come home and isolate and recuperate. But the biggest struggle I will say is, I start my day, no later than 7 a.m. And about 7 a.m. is when everybody in Denmark is getting ready to wrap things up and go home, because it's almost 2 o'clock in the afternoon there, and everybody shuts down at 3 o'clock. So I wake up pretty early. Sometimes I'm up at 5, sometimes I'm up at 6. Something that I've been working on and is waking up in the morning and not checking my email first thing. Not looking at my tasks or to-do list until I've had at least 1 cup of coffee and had a moment to just wake up, because I've gotten into this habit over the past couple of years of waking up. The first thing I do is check my phone, check my messages, check Teams, check emails. And I am all of a sudden overwhelmed by all this stuff because I'm like a day behind. And what I'm really starting to learn and adapt to, because I'm somebody that, when I have something in my inbox, I want to get it done right away. I'm very task oriented. I want to accomplish those tasks. I'm like Pac-Man. And I'm learning to just kind of play the long game a little bit better. And that's been good for me. It's been good for my anxiety, my mental health, to just, know my place, know when I need to tackle things. So just taking a breather helps big time.
That's awesome. Any kind of last things that we should know? Any other sneak peeks for me, or what's next for you as far as the Army Painter is concerned? I know people can check you out on their channel, which I will definitely link below in the chat. But any kind of exciting things you're excited about, especially as restrictions start to lift in the US and in the future?
Yeah, I'm excited. I just found out that Warzone is going to be happening.
I did see that. I'm hoping to make it. We'll see.
I hope you make it too. Let me know. I could put you in touch with Kelly. Maybe he can get you an early ticket. I don't know. But it's one of my favorite events every year. This is 2 years in a row that we've had to miss, WTC. So I'm really looking forward to next summer and being able to go and coach for Team USA again.
Also missed that 2 years. So hopefully I'll see you there too.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I'm looking forward to seeing people in the flesh again. In a weird way, I feel like I've bonded with a lot of 40K acquaintances and have become closer to them, even though I haven't seen them in a year and a half. So that's been a nice thing, but I'm really looking forward to actually seeing people again. And we've got a lot of good things coming down the pipe. We've got a new paint set coming out that I'm really excited about. And then some things later in the summer that you will really enjoy, and I think everybody will really enjoy. But right now, I urge everybody to check out the Game Master range of products from the Army Painter. It's basically everything that you would go to a hardware store or a big box store to purchase for building terrain in a box and in box sets. And we're coming out with some really cool terrain kits to build themed terrain, perfect for display boards and stuff like that I think people are really gonna love. So stay tuned for that. I think that's basically a display board in a box. So if you're a competitive gamer, definitely check that out.
All right. Well, we've been chatting with Adam Abramowitz of the Army Painter. Make sure to check out his work on the Army Painter YouTube channel, which I will link below. And if you guys are enjoying the content, please make sure to leave a comment below. And it would be lovely if you like the video, give me a good thumbs up. Or if you don't like it, thumbs down and tell me how much you hate it. Either way, subscribe. So that's been the interview with Adam Abramowitz. And take care.